Welcome to the Extraordinary Podcast, where we identify God's uncommon work in common life. Recognizing God's work requires intentionality, but articulating it motivates and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe to never miss an episode. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Cade Moberg, where he shares how his life was impacted by other Christians and institutions growing up that pointed him to Jesus and helped him persevere in his faith to figure out who Jesus was, but also the heart that Jesus has given him to serve others. So let's get into the conversation with Cade. Cade, thank you for taking time to be a guest on our show today. We appreciate you sharing a little bit about your story, so thank you. As we begin, could you share a little bit about your life growing up? What's a fun memory or two that you have?
Oh, golly. Okay, so, I had a lot of good memories growing up, but I think one of the best ones I had was when I was really young as a kid. And my dad used to do these things that we'd call milkshake nights. So, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. We would do giant milkshakes for dinner, and that was, for some reason, nutritional enough for all of us. So we would do just a giant milkshake for dinner, and then, breadsticks, cheese sticks, pizza, something like that with it. But those nights were always fun because we'd all get together, we'd have our milkshakes, we'd watch a movie or something. And, I just always thought that was really fun.
Different flavors of milkshake?
Usually mine was chocolate, but that's just because I was picky and I didn't want to try anything new. But, we'd always try different fun things. Everybody else would. All sorts of things. But that was a really great thing growing up.
Okay. So, now, as you mentioned the milkshakes, you are diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic.
Yep, when I was 7.
So, how did the milkshakes work?
So, a lot of the milkshake nights happened before the diagnosis. Afterwards, we still did them sometimes, but it was a lot more complicated. You just take the insulin for the food you're eating, so we could still do it. It just became a lot more infrequent.
Okay. So, now, if you mentioned that you were diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 7.
Yeah.
Can you share what that was like, as well as some of the things that you have to go through that people may not think of?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was diagnosed when I was 7, so I was pretty young. And looking back at it now, I honestly think it was better that I was pretty young because, I had a long time to figure out how to manage it better. I see a lot of people get diagnosed when they're, teens, early 20s, things like that, and they just have a rough time with it because they're so used to how they're living that it's like such a drastic change. But it was a lot easier for me. But yeah, so when I was 7, I was diagnosed, spent a couple days in the hospital. They, ran tests, were checking me out. We did a lot of diabetes education training, my parents and I, just learning how to do that, how to take care of it, how to manage it. Every 3 months, I still go to the endocrinologist to get checked out, and so they see how I'm doing, adjust insulin rates, carb ratios, things like that. But the practical side of that being is that it is kind of tough, a lot of things. I have to make a lot more decisions per day than a lot of people think I do. Because, it's easy to say, oh, you just count your carbs, do your insulin. But it is a whole lot more than that. So, if I want to go on a walk, I have to think, is that walk going to lower my blood sugar to a dangerous level? Should I eat something beforehand, or should I just not go on the walk? Exercising has always been kind of a difficulty for the same reasons. Should I go to the gym? Would I be all right if I went to the gym? Is my blood sugar too low? Is my blood sugar too high? Even driving places my college is about 6 hours away, so driving up and down between there, I have to really plan out when I'm going to stop to eat, what my blood sugar should look like while I'm doing it. And I have an insulin pump now, so it's a lot easier to manage that kind of, insulin delivery, but, it was a lot more difficult before the pump, and it still is a lot of extraneous, decision making, but...
Are there foods that you either need to avoid or be careful of that most people wouldn't think of?
The foods that are dangerous to me are dangerous to most people, just in different ways. So, high sugars, high carbs. Nobody really needs high sugar, high carb diet, but in my case specifically, those are the things that are going to most affect my blood sugar. So, you think like fibers and proteins, those are not that bad for me. It really is the sugar and the carbs that I'm looking at. But there's not specific foods that I just cannot eat. There are certain foods I don't eat because it's just not worth the hassle. Like, I'm not going to eat like 3-4 pieces of birthday cake because that's going to be something that's going to affect me for the next like 6 hours, and it's not worth it. I'll have a small slice and that'll be it. So, but no, nothing specific that I just cannot have.
So, and one of the things that came to mind is I'm pretty sure bananas are pretty high in sugar.
Yes, so fruits have a lot of natural sugars, which tends to, skyrocket your blood sugars pretty quickly because they also digest really fast.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, so, but I appreciate your point of there's a lot of decisions, daily decisions, that you have to think through that a lot of people just take for granted. Particularly most people your age can take for granted. And but it is different than type 2 diabetes in certain ways. But is your insulin pump, does it test your blood sugar, or does it just have a preset amount that it pumps?
So that's actually something interesting because I did just get a new insulin pump, and it does test my blood sugar and change the amount of insulin it delivers based on that number and then based on other predictive factors. But I just started that system like maybe a week ago.
Okay.
So the one I had before that, it did a prearranged amount that was set by my doctor. Just did its own calculations based on that, but it didn't check my blood sugar for me.
Yeah.
But the new system does, and it's very nice.
Yeah, well, good. It's nice to see progress in convenient ways. Even the one that was a preset amount was still better than the previous system.
Absolutely.
And so we just see improvement, and so that's great. Now, one of the things about your upbringing is you went to the Mount Pleasant Christian School, and for was it all of your education or most?
So I was homeschooled up until about 2nd grade, but
Okay.
after that, 2nd through 12th was all there.
So what did you like about, or what positive experiences do you have from the Mount Pleasant Christian School?
The best thing I think about MPCS is the community and the support you get from, your teachers and your friends. I was not bullied in high school, and that is a, kind of unique experience. I had a lot of good friends growing up. I had a lot of great teachers, and I always felt supported there. I always felt like people were invested not only in my education, but in my faith and, character development and things like that. It's like the teachers there really care about the whole person, not just what you're learning. And I think that was fantastic.
How many were in your graduating high school class?
That is the thing. It's very small. I think 7, if I remember how to count right. 6 or 7.
And I believe your brother's class was smaller.
His was 2.
That's what I thought. So and that varies from year to year with any school, but because of the low numbers, it does seem more extreme when you talk about 2 to 7 as opposed to 250 to 300. That's not as big of a gap percentage-wise. But so you had a wonderful experience there. Most of your education was there, and both your brother and sister graduated from there as well. And they both have spoken highly of it. And not that we're advocating. I mean, we have nothing against it, but the purpose of this is not a promo for Mount Pleasant Christian School, but I'm grateful that you had a great experience there. But as you said, part of what they did is the school helps you develop educational-wise, but also helped guide you to Jesus. Can you speak to when you first became serious about Jesus?
Yeah, so that's actually kind of an interesting story because I was raised in the church, and obviously I went to the Christian school. And so I had all of these like influencing factors just kind of always forming my opinions, but it didn't really become real to me until I was about 17. So it was really a lot of going through the motions, like learning, of course, but not believing. Because I think there's a definite difference between learning about something and believing that it's true. So growing up, I learned about it, but I didn't really start believing it until I was 17. And it really took me getting to a very low place in my life. Just everything seemed very hopeless at that point. And I had been pretty depressed for maybe 3-4 months, and I started looking into just anything to believe in, something that was higher than myself. higher than anything around me, something that was meaningful. And what I found was that most world religions, when they deal with pain, a lot of it are treated as something to avoid or just ignore or to even overcome. But when I looked at how Christianity dealt with pain, Christianity has a redemptive plan for pain. And I thought that was, so much better than the alternative. If you can choose redemption or just dealing with it, redemption is clearly a better option. So after kind of making that conclusion, I started trying to actually build a real relationship with God instead of the one that was just kind of there, kind of not, say my night prayers, go to bed, that kind of thing. And I have this ring. I've had it since I was 17, and it's because of that moment that I decided that I'm going to pursue this and find the hope that there is. Because, life without hope is meaningless, and hope without faith is blind. So, finding that thing really is what made me decide that this is worth it.
I appreciate you sharing that story, and as you're sharing it, it reminds me there's some similarities with your dad's story. Your dad was on the podcast a few months ago, and he looked for other options, for other things, just trying to figure out what faith meant, and Jesus met him where he was, and in a similar fashion, you explored what are the options,
right?
And not that you were necessarily rebelling. I don't know. Maybe you were. Maybe you weren't. But you were exploring, and I think it's okay. We have to make sure we recognize it's okay to explore. Like if Jesus is not intimidated by our questions,
right,
and or our doubts. Now, if we go to him indignant and arrogant, that's different than going to him with questions and doubt and
right.
of truly trying to seek. And so there's a difference there. But I appreciate you sharing that story. Now, as you think about your spiritual development, are there any ways that the church helped you or impacted you to draw closer to Jesus?
Absolutely. So, I talked about growing up in the church, and while that wasn't, maybe the initial thing that made me absolutely believe in God, but it was definitely the best support I had. So, I didn't grow up in this church particularly. I mean, I did around middle school, then on, but when I was elementary, younger, we went to a different church. But what I found was that church was the best place to find a community of people who were there to support you and, not judge you. So I think a lot of people who are outside of the church expect to come into the church and be nitpicked and this is what's wrong with you, this is what's wrong with you, this is what's wrong with you. But what, the church is called to do is to love those within the church. And we're definitely called to, examine sin within the church and call it out. But I don't think anybody expects us to be perfect. And so the thing that I really liked about church growing up, the thing that really helped me eventually make that decision to choose Jesus, was the community there of people who were invested in me and, just there for me when I was having a bad time or when I was having a good time, in their Christianity in church, you're doing life together as a group. And that's what I really liked about it. So,
well, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm grateful the church had a positive impact on you. Now, you are getting ready to graduate from college, and I do want to make sure we recognize in 3 years.
Yeah.
So I want to give you props for that.
Thanks.
But you are getting ready to graduate here in May. What is your degree, and why did you choose it?
So I am going to be graduating with my Bachelor in Social Work, BSW degree. And I chose that degree almost at random. I mean, not totally at random. I felt like a leaning towards it. I actually have kind of a fun story. So when I was choosing my college, I wasn't really sure what it was I wanted to do. I wanted to help people, which, that sounds like a very broad and generic. You can do that in almost any field, right? So when I was doing a college visit, it was for they call it the Founders, or they used to call it Founders, it changed, but it's a scholarship visit. So you'd go, you'd visit the college, you'd talk to different department heads. There was interviews. End of the day, you walk away with some money for the college. And I was still kind of looking for what it is I wanted to do. And I asked God, send me a sign. Show me what it is you want me to do. And so I was expecting, like some sort of just, gut feeling, something like that. Yeah. What I got was an actual sign. So when I was walking by the behavioral sciences department, on my college form, I had checked a couple boxes for what I was interested in. I think the two top things were social work and then also accounting, as far apart as they get. And so while I was walking by, I see this sign that says, "Welcome, Elijah Moberg." They misspelled my last name, but, that's fine. To the Bachelor of Social Work program. And I was like, well, that's a physical sign. I guess I'll take it. And, I'm glad I did, because I really love what I'm doing in the major. I don't have any regrets, and I think it'll be a good career.
Now, are you still doing an internship or practicum?
Yes.
So Can you share with us, are you able to share with us a little bit about that?
A little bit, yeah. So, respecting confidentiality, I'm doing my internship with a homeless services intervention program. So what they do is they do assessments for people who have become unhoused to find out levels of how they're dealing with it, how chronic is the problem, what would it take to get you back to independence, things like that. And then we take that information and we give it to different programs in the area that do rehousing. So, we'll take an assessment where we are, and then we figure out, hey, this person really just needs somewhere to stay for a couple weeks, then they're fine. So we give them to somewhere that'll let them stay. Or we take an assessment as this person really needs job training, they need money management, they need all these things. We direct them towards somewhere else that can get them those things. And I really like what I'm doing there, because it's really great to be able to see people reach that level of independence that they didn't have before. Because I think, that is the main goal of what we're doing, is we want to see you come through our doors, just not more than once, We want to get you the help you need. We want to get you independent. We want to get you, living again. Yeah. So, yeah.
So, what do you... helping people is something that you were drawn to. And is this your first semester with this organization?
Second semester.
Okay. So, you've had considerable time there. And what do you hope to do after you graduate? What's your dream?
Oh, golly. That is a tough one. So when I first started to do social work, I had very different goals. I wanted to help people, but I wanted to help an entirely different kind of population group. But through working with this internship, I really do want to invest my time more into homelessness and, unhoused people in the United States, because it's such a problem. Without a home, you're at the very baseline survival instinct. And, a lot of people want to say that you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and, you just need to get a job, you lazy bum. But, you can't get a job without a house. You can't get a house without a job. It's kind of a circular system that just doesn't work. So seeing that and being at that internship from, August till now, I've talked with a lot of people, I've seen a lot of things, and I've just kind of realized that is something that I think is definitely worth going into more full time. So I'm looking at some positions right now in the Springfield area, and then more local to here, that work with homelessness and unhoused people, because that is kind of what I want to get into. And I don't know if that's what I'll be long term, but I try to take everything kind of one step at a time, because long term goals are always shaky.
Yeah, as you're mentioning the housing and job and how they're connected, there's an organization here in Burlington, Transitions GMC, that helps with homelessness in certain situations. And one of the things about them is you have to have an ID first.
Yeah.
And if you don't have an ID, you can't even begin the process. And so they're just the little things that I would not even think of or take for granted, that to be employed, you have to show your ID. And so there's all sorts of, I'm sure, just minor details that can cause major roadblocks.
Absolutely.
But part of what you're doing with your current internship and what you seems like you hope to do is you see what the individual needs and you connect them with places that help. And so that's a great thing to do, and I appreciate your willingness to serve. I hope people are challenged by your heart here, and because Jesus calls us to serve.
Yeah.
Right? Now,
Absolutely.
the great thing about the church is I can't be all things to all people. You can't be all things to all people. And even in your particular field, if you help the homeless community, that's only one community that needs help, right? And you can only help a certain area of that need. And so part of the church is we can use our gifts to impact the world where Jesus has given us passions. But with your particular situation of you went into social work thinking you were going to do one thing, but now you are looking towards a different particular area. So it's not as though you have to have it figured out before you try and you get into it. So, well, thank you for sharing today. And I like to end with a very open-ended question of, is there anything else you would like to share today?
Okay. So I got, I guess, one thing. The biggest thing that I think has helped me with my faith is persistence and not giving up when things got difficult. And I think that's a big problem with a lot of people, is that they think Christianity is going to be easy or it's going to be simple. And in some cases it is easy and simple, like some factors, but I think it's really important to keep with it, persist through the struggles and wait for God to lead you into a way you want to go, into the way He wants you to go, rather. So if I could end with anything, I guess it'd be persist and trust.
That's great. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your heart and challenging us today. So we appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Be on the lookout for how God does uncommon work in common life. And please subscribe to never miss an episode.